Hi everyone, and welcome to the next video in the Bobby Fischer series. This time we're going to have a look at a game he played against another world champion, Mikhail Tal, who had lost his title of world champion to Mikhail only a couple of months before this game was played at the famous Bled super tournament of 1961. Tal was a very imaginative, aggressive and creative player who was famous for winning games despite making sacrifices that were later proved to be unsound. He was a tactical genius and spent upwards of 10 hours studying and playing chess on a daily basis. Bobby Fischer was just 18 at the time of this game, and already of course a massive chess intellect and feared opponent. He had white in this game and opened as usual with e4. Tal responded as one might expect, with c5, the Sicilian defense, widely regarded as the sharpest way to play against e4. Play continued with the book line knight f3, knight c6, d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, and e6, the Taimanov variation. Fischer continued with knight c3, which was not his normal move in this position. Tal would have been expecting knight b5, which Fischer had played consistently for all of the previous year, and for which Tal had almost certainly prepared. In the notes to this game, Fischer wrote that at the time he still considered it to be the best move. After Fischer's knight c3, Tal played queen c7, which is aiming for pressure on the c2 pawn and giving the potential for play down the semi-open c-file. Fischer answered with g3, which he described as a perfectly legitimate treatment, which Botvinnik labelled a very cunning and well-masked idea. The reason Botvinnik gave it this description is because there are several traps set as a result of this move, which we'll get into later. Fischer hadn't intended them at this stage, but was permitted to make them after Tal's next move, knight f6. In a good-humoured way, Fischer labelled this as the losing move of the game in his analysis. He added that Tal looked worried immediately after playing it, but Fischer was not completely convinced that Tal thought he had made a careless move. The correct way to play, given by Fischer, is instead a6, preventing later knight b5, and after, for example, bishop g2, only now knight f6, and it's a fairly equal position. So Tal has played at knight f6, and how does this get exploited? Knight db5 is the move, and this is the problem with Tal having played knight f6 instead of a6, because the queen must now retreat, and she's tied to defending the d6 square due to the threat of knight d6 check, which pretty much forces bishop takes d6, which not only gives white the bishop pair after queen takes d6, but also gives him very strong play in the weak and dark squares of the black position, all around here. So Tal played queen b8, which defends d6. And if he tried instead queen a5 in order to prevent knight d6, because the e-pawn would be hanging, after bishop takes d6, queen takes d6, there would be knight takes e4. Fischer could have played bishop d2, which pretty much forces queen d8, and now not knight d6 but bishop f4, threatening knight c7 check, is very strong. If black plays e5, then bishop g5, exchanging on f6, and a later exploitation of this d5 outpost square gives white excellent chances. So queen b8 is what Tal has just played, and Fischer continued with bishop f4, which aims a third piece at this d6 hole in black's pawn structure with tempo, because the queen is attacked, and this provokes a tricky situation already for Tal, and he has to accept already that Fischer is going to have a decent advantage out of the opening. Tal thought for a long time and decided on the risky continuation, knight e5. His only alternative was e5, where after bishop g5, a6, bishop takes f6, a takes b5 is the best that black can do, and white will answer with bishop g5 with a clear advantage. If instead at this stage g takes f6, white is again much better after, for example, knight a3, b5, and knight d5. This d5 outpost again is going to be very strong. So knight e5 is what Tal has just played, and Fischer continued with bishop e2, which is a move that Tal may have overlooked, expecting the standard bishop g2 and a fianchetto setup, and this prepares queen d4, which would provoke a crisis, and it also keeps an eye on defending the knight here at b5. Tal now prevented queen d4 with bishop c5, but this is a weak move. Fischer gives analysis on several alternatives, coming to the conclusion that white is better in every continuation. For example, if instead a6, now comes queen d4, threatening to win the knight, and the best way to answer is d6. Taking on b5 instead will lose a pawn after bishop takes e5 and any queen move, and then taking on b5, the pawn will be hanging here. But from here, white has rook d1, threatening to take on e5 and deliver mate on d8, which is ultimately going to win at least a pawn after, for example, a takes b5, bishop takes e5, and at least a pawn is falling here for black. Another ninth move alternative, instead of a6 at this stage, is d6 instead of a6. But now again queen d4 is very strong, because black hasn't played a6 before d6. He now has the resource knight c6, but white is still much better after simply knight takes d6 check, a full pawn ahead with a very strong position to boot. But anyway, back to the game continuation. Bishop c5 is what Tal has played. So Fischer continued with bishop takes e5, which is easily the strongest move in the position, as white is gaining great space with tempo after the forcing line queen takes e5, f4, queen b8, and e5. Tal responded quickly and aggressively with a6, which is going to lose at least a pawn, but realistically is the only hope he has. Playing instead knight g8 in order to avoid losing a pawn. If he plays knight d5, he's just losing a pawn on d5. It's hopeless after, for example, knight e4, bishop e7, queen d2, followed up with knight bd6 check, and castling queenside is totally crushing. In all of these variations, we're seeing Fischer emphasize the weak dark squares in the black position, notably d6, which is a drawback for black in many variations of the Sicilian, and Fischer exploits it here mercilessly. So the game continuation anyway is a6. That's what Tal has just played. So e takes f6, a takes b5, and f takes g7, which is snapping up the offered pawn. Another possibility was knight e4, where after the best move, bishop f8, because the bishop's attacked, queen d4 is very strong. And Fischer wrote that he wanted the pawn that he took, in the game continuation, because he'd played Tal 6 times before this game, and he'd only got 2 draws out of those 6 games, so he was in no mood to speculate or, cloud the issue, so he took on g7 instead at this stage. So rook g8 is forced, and now knight e4, attacking the bishop, but pretty much forcing bishop e7. And now with queen d4, white remains the pawn up with a far better position. Tal was starting to feel the pressure now, and he played rook a4 in a desperate attempt to complicate the position and create some tactical chances where he could hope for an escape from what's becoming a lost position. Analysing the game, the then world champion Mikhail Botvinnik was of the opinion that queen c7 held out more chance for survival. So rook a4 anyway from Tal, and knight f6 check is how Fischer continued, again with the idea of exploiting the weak dark squares in the black position, because bishop takes f6 is forced, and now comes queen takes f6, where if we stop for a moment and have a look at the positional factors, we see that white has acquired several advantages as the middle game has been reached. First of all, he's a pawn up, but on top of that he has a far better bishop. Tal's is completely restricted and will remain so for a long while to come, Additionally, black can't castle because he's moved both rooks. He has doubled and isolated b-pawns, and his pieces are badly uncoordinated and passive. It was another world champion, Steinitz, a great hero to Fischer, who said that winning chess is about acquiring such small advantages, and we're seeing a great display of that tenet here. Okay, that's the end of part 1.